Hi, I'm Jared Hillam. After 6 years of deploying Snowflake, we've started to see patterns in adoption. These different patterns have emerged as maturity levels within the Snowflake community. These maturity levels don't always manifest themselves in the order that I'm going to cover, so you'll likely find some variation from what you've experienced. But I would like to use this video to describe what maturity looks like within the dynamics of an unlimited data estate. The first stage of maturity is what I call new to cloud. This Snowflake deployment usually is starting a new data feed into the cloud, and these deployments are often part of a small project, and they act as a testbed for the viability of the cloud as a future platform for the organization's data. What these small projects often don't realize is that their deployment of Snowflake is likely to house all the post-transaction data the organization has, at least at some point. So building best practices early can pay big dividends down the road. This includes laying down a data orchestration architecture that can leverage and optimize Snowflake's scale. The second stage is a result of the organization realizing all the operational benefits Snowflake has, and this is the migration stage. The migration stage is one that involves moving the old data management code from the legacy systems into Snowflake, as well as the data footprint itself. Accomplishing that task today is no longer a manual effort. Organizations should seek to leverage code conversion automation to make that transition occur. Entricity leverages such automation during its code conversion projects using a tool called BladeBridge. The migration of code from legacy systems provides a replication of existing data automation processes within the data cloud. However, that migrated data represents only a small portion of the overall data landscape. This leads us to the third stage of maturity, which is a consolidation. Snowflake turns out to be an excellent location to house the full ecosystem of corporate data because of how cheap the storage is. But the real draw is that the sea of data housed there is queryable. Now, you could argue that any of these other storage systems is queryable, and that would be technically true. But I would argue that any system that takes too long to return a query shouldn't be called queryable. This is partially the reason traditional big data Hadoop ecosystems never really delivered on their huge promise. Snowflake does make the broad sea of data queryable, and it does so with the cheapest possible storage costs. In addition to consolidating the overall data landscape, there's also an opportunity to consolidate the data logic into analytical dimensions so team members don't have to devise complex query plans to get the information they need. Snowflake's ability to iterate logic on copies without duplicating the data footprint makes it ideal for those activities. With all the internal data residing in one place, Snowflake customers begin to see where the topical gaps are in their existing data landscape. This could be weather data, traffic data, COVID data, geospatial boundary data, etc. Being able to enrich the existing data landscape with such data further increases the value of the intelligence coming from Snowflake. Making this tie is what we call the enrichment stage. What makes Snowflake unique in this stage is that Snowflake natively provides data sets as part of their cloud platform. There's no need to FTP data or deal with excessive ETL activities. Their data marketplace provides ready access to both public and commercial data sets. With the entire ecosystem of corporate and enriched data existing in Snowflake, new needs arise for connecting the user communities to their data. See, the sluggishness of legacy architectures physically limited how many users could access data. But now with all the data living in one place, it centralizes a vast array of users, each with their own data consumption requirements and tooling. And this creates a new challenge. How do you map all this data to all these users so they're not wasting their time sifting through data that's irrelevant to their needs? This is where the fifth stage of maturity comes into play, which we call the association stage. I have an entire video dedicated to this topic called What is Access Control? But in short, naming conventions for objects must be planned, then tied to functional roles which get mapped to existing identity management systems and binds the users to those functional roles. This ensures that the consumption of the data isn't just an exercise in navigating noise. Now, Entricity has built an entire automation suite to address this maturity challenge called the Flow Objects Access Control Master. With all the user communities and the data mapped to each other, we begin to see the entire organizational landscape working from a cohesive standard to turn data into information. This enables the organization to use Snowflake's native data sharing capabilities. For example, large organizations may use this to share data between departments or simply sharing data with external partners. Along with this, data sharing allows organizations to share data on Snowflake's data marketplace. This brings the organization new economic opportunities to increase their margins and market presence on their existing offerings. We call this last stage the sharing and marketability stage. In this stage, the ideation of products and offerings now comes coupled with how the sharing of data can impact the marketability, adoption, and margin for those very products and offerings. As we mentioned earlier, the order of how your adoption of Snowflake takes place will vary from the 6 categories mentioned in this video. Depending on where you are in the maturity of your Snowflake deployment, we can help you transition through that maturity. Now, I've written a white paper on Snowflake maturity, which you'll find in the video description. Also, if you'd like to speak with an Intricity specialist about your specific Snowflake deployment, you'll find a link for that as well.